Welcome on in, everybody. Week 3 of the Florida State football season, week 3 of the Warchant Report powered by Cummins. Visit shop.cummins.com and use the promo code TAILGATE. You can save 10% off several models of generators, whether it's portable power stations, RV generators, and the like, over at shop.cummins.com. The Noles are on the road, everybody. Get in that RV. Follow them on their travels and have an RV powered by Cummins. We're joined here by Irish O'Fell, managing editor of Warchant.com, and Tom Lang, the director of original content for Warchant.com, who also moonlights as the executive producer of the Jeff Cameron Show. You may have heard of that one, folks. 1 to 3 o'clock, 93.3 FM, as well as right here on Warchant TV. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us. Florida State off to a rip-roaring start, 2-0, now ranked number 3 in the nation. Feels good. Feels real good when you know they're ranked that highly. Want to start it off, though, here, Ira. The old saying goes, numbers lie, or liars figure and figures lie, or something like that I already butchered. Fool me once, shame on me, whatever it goes. But defensively, it seems like the defense has been the story so far this early season for Florida State. Statistically, though, they're like in the 70s, which they were in the 20s last year. So explain to me how this defense is better than last year, even if the numbers aren't proving it out so far through 2 games.
Well, I think, you really, since it is such a small sample, we can really look at what actually has happened. In the first game, I think early on, LSU hit some big plays. They got some yards. They got some points in the first half of that game. But in the second game, when you look at the Southern Miss game, they did nothing against the first team defense. They literally had 70 yards of offense in the first half. They had 3 points, and that was basically 1 penalty and 1 big play. So really the rest of the game was against the backups, the second, third team, the freshmen. And so they ended up getting 258 yards of offense, but very little of that was against the first team defense. So I think, really the first, they got out of the gates a little bit slow against LSU, but after that they settled down and they played tremendously, really the last 6 quarters.
Tom, is there anything that you can point to when it comes to this defense being so much more seemingly more talented, more effective, even though if the numbers might not support it right now in this early part of the season?
Yeah, it's just the way they stopped the run versus last year. The last couple of pieces of evidence for Florida State's defense, and especially the defensive interior, was that it wasn't that great against Florida and Oklahoma, as those offensive lines controlled the action against Florida State's defense. Against LSU, the Noles, the traditional run, they were stout against it. And, they had a 6-play stand. You call a goal line stand a 6-down stand on the first drive for LSU. That's an emotional moment where a lot of things had to happen and work in concert. You guys remember practice a couple of weeks ago when Adam Fuller said, we like one-on-ones too for our corners. And that's something that's also a little bit different than last year. You go down to the end of the game, situation with Jaden Daniels against that FSU secondary. Jaden Daniels is picking apart one-on-ones. This year, couldn't find a guy open, and that leads to a goal line stand. I think the coverage ability of this group has improved, and obviously we've seen their ability to stop the run improve. It's a matter of the splashy stats coming in time, but this group it looks like it's deeper and more talented across the board. The numbers are going to come.
Yeah, number 3, Florida State taking on Boston College up in Chestnut Hill on Saturday, high noon. Ira will be there representing the Warchant family covering this one. Ira, the story this week, I guess, when you're number 3 in the nation and you seem to be having every matchup in your favor, you start looking at the minutia and probably overanalyzing things. So Johnny Wilson has really fallen into the focus of a lot of Florida State fans and what we've had to kind of maybe talk about this week after coming off some of the struggles he had against Southern Miss. Is it key for him to get back on track, quote unquote, this week? Or simply what we've seen from Johnny, even these 2 games, kind of representative of who he is and what he has been as a Florida State Seminole?
Yeah, I mean, you'd like to think that it's something where he's just going to get past it and it's going to be in the rearview mirror. But I don't know if there's been any evidence to make us believe that. I mean, he's been on campus now for about 20 months. And he's had stretches where he's dropped fewer passes, but it's never like it's been completely licked. So I think it's going to be something that, he has to battle. But the good thing is, I think it is something that he can control to some degree, because if you looked at him at practice this week, I don't know if he dropped a pass in practice this week. And the weird thing about the drops in the Southern Miss game was they weren't really necessarily the normal drops. It was he didn't finish catches. 2 of the catches where he didn't finish them after he hit the ground. And so, I mean, that's a little bit different than just, basically swatting down a pass. So I think he can play better than he played certainly against Southern Miss. I think he's more what you're going to expect is probably a little bit more like that LSU game where, 7 catches, over 100 yards, but maybe has a drop or two along the way. I don't think he's ever going to be a sure-handed receiver who doesn't drop anything.
Yeah, I mean, Tom, again, at Tyra's point, he's been here for 20 months. Kind of, the rap on him coming out of Tempe and Arizona State was inconsistency in catching the ball and controlling throughout the process of the catch. Is that what we're just kind of seeing out of Johnny's who he is, or is there some sort of, gear in him that, he needs to get back on track and find and take hold of?
Yeah, I think it's just he's a streaky player when it comes to this stuff. I don't know, like if he changes and he becomes, as Ira wants to term it, a sure-handed receiver, that would be a first, and it would be really dangerous for Florida State's offense. But the thing is that Johnny isn't the type of player where all he does and the only importance he has to the roster is just catching passes. The details of what he is as a player, the type of citizen he is with the culture, the mismatch that you have to honor, even with a propensity to drop the ball, is real at that size. So it's a net positive all the way. I hope for Johnny, I think many do out there, that this is something that's looked back on with a smile, saying, remember those days when there wasn't consistency in bringing the ball in? But it's just something that's always going to be there. The question is, does it get to a place where it's debilitating for Johnny? And I agree with Ira too, Aslan, that the drops against LSU in those third down situations, those are more egregious in my mind than some of these contested catches, these 50-50 ones for Southern Miss. But no matter the case, whatever the drop is, you would like to see in Boston College, the first 2 or 3 targets he comes down with, and then it's just kind of a dead issue moving forward until the next drop, that is.
And if I can just add to that real quick, I don't want to sound like I'm down on Johnny. I still think Johnny Wilson's is a unique of a weapon as Florida State has on offense, maybe the most unique weapon that they have on offense. And I think you keep giving him at bats, and he's going to have huge games like he did against Oklahoma with over 200 yards. And he's going to have another game here or there where you get a little frustrated. But I think he's one of those guys that's going to be feast or famine, but the feast is incredible.
As we start to pivot now and look towards Boston College as we come up on the next part of the show here, just real quick, want to get your feel, guys. Real quick, Ira, too. We didn't see Robert Scott. We didn't see Maurice Smith in the last game. How do you think Mike Norvell is going to manage this game in terms of, does he look at it as, this is an ACC opener, I want to be completely full strength, I want all my horses available, or do you think there's going to be some sort of propensity to want to look ahead to maybe being fully go for Clemson?
I think you do have the luxury of trying to get fully healthy for Clemson. And again, there's certain times where, you can criticize coaches when they do that. Going back 11 years now, I was critical of Jimbo Fisher for not starting EJ Manuel against Wake Forest because he was good enough to actually come into that game. So then why didn't you start him? And I thought you sent a message to your team that you didn't really take that game that seriously. And I thought it came back to haunt him. That was 2011. The difference here is that was a young team. That was a team that was not very mature. I don't think they handled that very well, and it wasn't a very complete team. This is a little bit different. This is a very mature team. I think you've got a lot of veterans. So, you've got Darius Washington to play center. If Robert Scott takes another week off, you've got Bless Harris to play left tackle, or Byers you could go to, or they have other options as well. So to me, when you have a very mature team, if you can get some guys healthy going into next week, I think going into Clemson, I think that's what you do. Obviously, you don't want to take any risks, but this is a game. It is an ACC game, but it's also against an ACC opponent that nearly lost to Holy Cross and did lose to Northern Illinois. So unless BC has been hiding some really crazy tricks over these first couple weeks, I think Florida State should be able to win the game, even if they don't play all their best players.
Tom, how excited are you to maybe see Kevin Noles in an expanded role if Akeem Dent, for whatever reason, from Saturday, if he's not able to get right? Noles had a really great week of practice. You saw some of it too. How intriguing is it to see what maybe Kevin Noles could do in increased playing time?
This is where I like when Mike Norvell gives us a layup. He said last week that Kevin had been dealing with something in camp and lingered into the LSU game, and then he was at full speed. That was prior to the Southern Miss game. I thought the first impression at camp from Kevin Noles was amazing compared to, what we saw last, which was a guy who was a liability in the slot at corner. He was a little undersized, and that was partly because of injury. And we know, guys, he was wearing the green jersey pretty much all last year for no contact. So it was a tough, you couldn't assess what Kevin Noles was, other than, unfortunately, on game days when it comes down to results over process, not reliable. So then flash forward all the way to fall camp, and he looked stronger. He looked larger and faster and more explosive in that defensive backfield. And then he had to deal with something that Mike Norvell alluded to. I can't wait. In short, I can't wait to see what this player can be, because he's twofold. He's a good athlete that gets downhill, is aggressive and a big hitter. That's what he was as a true freshman. But then the leadership qualities that he's shown from fall camp all the way till now, you need a guy like that on the field who, when adversity strikes, can calm guys down in the backfield. And to have a veteran like that to pair with the Shaheem Brown, who's in his first season on the field, really play for play, expected to be as a starter. I just think that's a nice anchor to have if Akeem can't go the whole way. Kevin Noles is somebody I can't wait to watch, and I think he's going to be a big part of the rotation moving forward. Adam Fuller said as much, I think, after scrimmage 1 or scrimmage 2, that when Kevin's healthy, he's going to be a big player for Florida State's safety.
Again, Florida State taking on Boston College. What do we know about the Eagles? They're 1-1 on the year. They're breaking in a new quarterback, but we'll get a deeper look at the Eagles right after this on the Warchant Report, powered by Cummins. Hit the road and follow the Noles during their sensational start in your RV or motorhome, powered by Cummins, a global power leader. The Onan QG 5500 generator is a perfect fit for your fifth wheel or Class A motorhome. It's powerful enough to run not one but 2 air conditioners with power to spare, and with its exceptionally low level of vibration, the QG 5500 has earned the title of quietest in its class. Its self-diagnostic capabilities, in addition to digital voltage regulation, assure stable, reliable power. Sure power connections, never a given when you're making pit stops on your travels, and especially when tailgating on the road. And hey, your RV is your home on wheels. Get every ounce out of it with reliable, quiet power from the Onan QG 5500 by Cummins. You can save 10% on the QG 5500 when you use the promo code TAILGATE, TAILG, then the numeral 8. Visit shop.cummins.com or rv.cummins.com to find a dealer near you. Welcome on in back to the Warchant Report, powered by Cummins. Number 3, Florida State taking on Boston College at noon. ACC opener for both of these programs. Florida State 2-0, obviously. Boston College 1-1. That's a surface. Let's take a deeper dive in seeing what Boston College is all about this year. Our own Matt Lasser caught up with Kevin Stone of the New England Football Journal to talk BC football.
So we all just want to get more familiar with this Boston College team as Florida State goes to play them this weekend. To start off, we all thought Moorhead would be your guys' quarterback for the whole year. Where did Castellanos come into the picture, and what other pieces do you think need to perform well on this offense this weekend to do well against Florida State?
So throughout the summer, I sort of dismissed any chance that this was not Emmett Moorhead's team, just because we hadn't seen Castellanos play at all. But every once in a while, Coach Hafley would sort of drop hints that Castellanos was pushing him. And again, it was like, okay, that's further down the road. Maybe Moorhead messes up a few games. But all of a sudden, 2 series in against NIU, we see Tom Castellanos. And frankly, I'm still shocked that he's the quarterback right now. Emmett Moorhead, they brought him to ACC Media Day. They pushed him as QB1. But then that first game, during the post-game press conferences, there was a few people that admitted, no, yeah, we were going with Thomas after the second series. So I think it's just a matter of they really can't decide who the better quarterback is right now. I think it's as blatant as that. They are starting Castellanos again this week. He was good against Holy Cross. Still has some immaturity issues. He was taunting instead of getting a first down, got a flag, completely killed the drive. Again, he's a sophomore, just like Moorhead. So there's some immaturity issues there, but he's definitely the more talented guy. But frankly, everyone that covers this team is stunned that we are seeing this right now this early. If BC is going to keep it close, it's their running game and then their receiving core. Their main guy, Pat Garwell, was in a boot after the game. No update on him. I wouldn't be surprised if he's not playing, but they have 2 kids, Kai Robichaud and Alex Broom. We're both very good backs, and this offensive line is much better than it was last year. So if they can run the ball and keep a guy like Jordan Travis off the field, you got a shot. But if they get into a shootout, well, then you're looking at guys like Joe Griffin, a sophomore receiver, Ryan O'Keefe, who's arguably the fastest player in the ACC, a former UCF guy. So they have some speed, they have some talent, and again, the offensive line is better. I just think Florida State is way too deep and way too athletic.
BC also brought in a new offensive coordinator along with a new offensive line coach this past offseason. How has the offensive line looked through the first 2 games with this transition?
Much better. And again, I go back to the health. Last year, those guys had 4 combined starts total. Heading into this year, they had 122, I think it was. So just based on experience alone, they're much better. And again, I go back to Christian Mahogany. He's sort of that guy that brings the nasty, up front. So they are infinitely better. And you mentioned the new OC, Rod Chudzinski. He coached in the NFL. That's an NFL mind who's now running that offense, along with Steve Shimko as co-offensive coordinators. He was a quarterback for BC at one point and has been here with the quarterbacks over the last 3 years. So it's been good so far. Again, in terms of this weekend, though, I think Florida State's just too good.
As we transition over to the defense for the Eagles, this team statistically has given up a lot of yards on the ground. Is that because NIU and Holy Cross are both run-heavy teams, or is it just because the secondary is really good?
It's a little bit of both. At linebacker, BC is very thin. You have Vinny DePalma, who I think is in like his 18th year with BC. He's been there forever. He's a good middle linebacker. And they have Cam Arnold, who's just an athletic freak. But after that, they don't have much. One of their main linebackers last year, Bryce Steele, is going through a personal kind of health issue right now. I'm not sure if he's even going to play the rest of the season. He's a huge loss in the middle for them. And the defensive line, they're a little bit small. Sheeta Salah is probably their best and most athletic guy. Him and Donovan Ezeraku, who made a name for himself last year as I think the ACC sack leader, if I'm not mistaken. So there's some talent up there, but they're a little bit on the smaller side. So I think teams want to kind of push them around.
Awesome, man. Well, that's all I got for you. Thank you for helping us learn about this BC team.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks again to Matt and Kevin. Tom, sounds like, Kevin doesn't have the highest hopes for Boston College going into this game, but, we hear that weather could be a great equalizer. Hurricane Lee is out there in the Atlantic. Not quite sure its path, how much it will affect the game on Saturday. But it certainly feels like, that Florida State has reached a point, at least this season with this schedule, to where they have enough physical talent, enough sound coaching that even something like the weather won't be a great equalizer in this matchup, it feels like.
Yeah, I agree on the surface. I would like to see exactly that forecast, because if it's absurd and they play through it, I suppose there have been examples in the recent past, one in the ACC last year, Ohio State at Northwestern in November. There was a windstorm and a rainstorm, and that Ohio State team that probably should have beaten Georgia in the college football playoff semifinals, they were tied with Northwestern 7-7 deep into the third quarter. They were only up 14-7 with about 5 minutes to go in that football game. So, the wind is the bigger factor than the rain. But, if you're looking bottom line, Ira talked about it first segment. You got Holy Cross and, Northern Illinois that BC has played so far, and they're 1-1 in those games. Maybe could have been 0-2 in those games. I think Florida State's in a position here where the variety of what they do on offense allows them to run the ball out of different formations. If you got to really simplify the game plan because of wind, they can do that. And then talked about the run defense too. They are fit for a game like this, no doubt about it. But if you're trying to predict scores like we're going to do in a little bit, or you take a look at what Las Vegas has to say based upon game totals and spreads, man, it could be anything, depending upon how far west Lee ticks. So we'll see. But I agree with the principle of the question that Florida State is probably beyond a level of concern due to the weather.
Yeah. Do you agree with that, Ira? Or at least can we savor maybe the fact that Florida State's at a point now where like an active nature is like the only thing that's really keeping you up maybe at night if you're a Florida State fan thinking about your ACC opener?
Yeah, look, if you're the favorite, you certainly don't want terrible weather. It's not it's not even a cliche. It's just reality. It's going to favor the chance of more turnovers, the chance of just kind of leveling the playing field. Reducing the speed. Obviously, Florida State should have a huge advantage in terms of speed against Boston College, so that might get neutralized a little bit. Then the passing game as well. I do think the fact that this team is built the way it's built helps, though. You've got a big offensive line. You've got some big, powerful running backs. You've got some tight ends. So if you do want to throw the football, it's not like you've got to throw it 40 or 50 yards downfield. You can throw it to Jaheim Bell and Kyle Morlock and Marquiston Douglas and those guys in the flats. And then again, just kind of going back to what I said earlier, I do think this is a mature team, and that helps in these instances. I mean, usually a mentally weaker, less experienced team is going to be more affected sometimes by elements. So I think they're going to be fine, but it's not good. If you're the underdog, you want the worst weather possible. And, it sounds like one way or another, Boston College is probably going to get it.
I don't know if the offense has been sort of their hallmark so far this year. Tom has been their fourth down propensity and the freewheeling dealing there, but this obviously was a huge part of the success, or maybe the tempo and the tone that was sent in the game victory over Southern Miss was going forward on fourth down. Was that maybe, do you think that was a one-off? We've obviously seen Mike Norvell now here through 3 years and 2 games. How likely is it to go for it on fourth down? Do you anticipate that same sort of aggression, weather permitting here for Florida State coming up on Saturday against Boston College?
Specifically on Saturday, weather permitting, I could see him doing it again. But in a game against the Clemson, or let's say Miami rises and what we've seen so far is legitimate and Miami's a big threat, or an ACC championship game, I don't know if you're going to go on 4th and 5 from midfield, because that happened twice in the game on Saturday where they're just over midfield for a 4th and 5 and they're just behind midfield for a 4th and 5, and Florida State goes for it in both of those circumstances. Like the 4th and 10 from the 39, maybe he would do that in any situation because you're kind of in no man's land. But I think more what was happening against Southern Miss, where you're going for it on a 4th and medium at the midway point of the field, is psychologically you're trying to send a message to your own team that, hey, stay locked in. This game matters. These situations matter. He followed back, I think, rightfully on a good line where he trusts his defense. That's why he's doing that, because he trusts he can put his defense in a dire situation. But I don't think part and parcel 4th and 5 from midfield or 4th and long from midfield is going to be a part of the rotation.
They've gone for it on fourth down 6 times now, Ira. That's 20th in the country. I think they're 20th also in terms of their percentage in converting on fourth downs. Do you see that being part of just what this team is going to be this year? Like this, killer instinct I think you mentioned in your 3-2-1?
Yeah, I mean, I think like Tom said, I think it is something that he is going to want to have that mentality. But against better teams, I think it's going to be more so on the plus side of the field. I mean, I think, especially, the game we're all, we're talking about Boston College right now, but the reality is we're all looking ahead to that Clemson game. Florida State's players can't do that, but we can. And in that Clemson game, I think, going against a young quarterback, you're not going to want to give them a short field. So I think you go back to how good he feels about that defense, to where he could say against Southern Miss, look, I don't care if I give them the ball at the 50, they're not going to score. Against Clemson, I think you use that defense, you look at it the other way. You say, my defense is good enough that there's no way you're going to drive 70 or 80 yards. So if I punt it down to the 15 or the 20, and Alex Mastromano, everybody remembers, is excellent about punting the ball inside the 20-yard line without getting a touchback. Man, it would be hard if you've watched that Clemson offense, if you're a Clemson fan, to feel like they're going to have a whole lot of 80 to 85-yard drives against this Florida State defense. So I think it changes in that game. But in this game, yeah, he might be a little bit more aggressive again. I do think, to Tom's point, I think Southern Miss was a little bit of an exception compared to what we might see in an ACC game, though.
Full breakdown of the opponent. Only one thing left to do, and that's put our names out there and make a pick. Predictions coming up from the Warchant.com staff, as well as our panel right here on the Warchant Report, powered by Cummins.
Whether the power is out or you're out of pocket, be the hero with portable power from Cummins, a global power leader. Onan Power Stations, perfect for mobile lifestyles, small and compact. Cummins Onan Power Stations provide temporary, off-the-grid power. Use it to charge your mobile devices, power your TV for the tailgate, run a fan to cool the party, or light up the after-dark celebration. Cummins offers power stations from 100 to 1,000 watts. These can be very handy during those temporary thunderstorm power outages we often get in the southeast in the afternoons. Use the promo code TAILGATE, TAILG, numeral 8, for a 10% discount at shop.cummins.com.
Welcome on back to the Warchant Report, powered by Cummins. A reminder, you can save 10% off several models of the Onan power stations, also the portable generators and the RV generator as well, which you spoke about earlier in the show. Just got to go to shop.cummins.com and use that promo code TAILGATE, TAILG, numeral 8. There's a Florida State alum behind all this that works high up in Cummins. He watched the program, so Florida State fans looking out for one another. And again, get in that RV, get it juiced up properly with a generator, an RV generator by Cummins. All right, gentlemen, before we make our picks, we've got a lot of important people over at warchant.com that want to let their voices be heard. The rest of our staff now making their game predictions for Florida State and Boston College.
I think the biggest competition in this game is going to be hurricane, or probably by the time you listen to this, tropical storm Lee, which won't be hitting directly, but will have some impact on the game with a lot of windy and rainy weather. Boston College, on the other hand, not that difficult. They lost to Northern Illinois. They barely squeaked by Holy Cross. But because of the weather conditions, I think that'll hold the score down just a bit. Expect big games from Trey Benson and Keziah Holmes. I think Florida State's really going to grind this one out on the ground and get out of Boston 3-0, winning 35-7 for the Noles.
What's up, Nole fans? It's week 3. I'm 2-0 so far. I predicted 2 wins. I haven't gotten the score exactly right, but I predicted 2 wins. I'm predicting another win, not shockingly there. It's hard to know with the weather. I just want that to be the caveat, the qualifier. Florida State completely overwhelms this team from a talent standpoint, but the weather can be a great equalizer. With that, I'm gonna assume there's gonna be rain and wind, so it's not gonna be a high fly and 55-point showing for the offense. I'm looking somewhere in the neighborhood of 34-10. But maybe the Boston College kid can make a couple plays with his legs, and they can score that way. But I think in the second half, Florida State should be in cruise control. And I'm looking at 34-10, and you hope you get out injury-free and as you head into Clemson.
What's up, gang? Hope everybody is doing well. Well, this is a weird pick, right? Because the weather could play a huge part in this, but I still love Florida State big. Obviously, if it's a deluge and it's windy, it could be a game where it's unfortunately closer than it needs to be. That's the only thing that would help BC at this point. I just don't think they have the hosses up front. I'll take Florida State to kind of be straight ahead, buttoned up, businesslike, win this game 38-7. 38-7 Noles over Boston College.
I think Boston College will score probably early just because the red bandana game, you know, the hype for that, it plays a lot into emotions. So I think they'll score once early. As for Florida State, I think it's going to be ground and pound here, not just because of the weather conditions, but just this offensive line is much better than this defensive line, much bigger than this defensive line. I think that Florida State will take advantage. If you can find Trey Benson props, I would take his over wherever you can. My prediction for this game, I think Florida State wins it pretty easily. I'll go 55-7.
2 weeks, we've had a clean sweep, unanimous across the board. Can we make it lucky number 3? We start off with you, Tom Lang. Number 3, Florida State taking on Boston College in Chestnut Hill. Red bandana game for the Eagles. You know, that's a huge, important game for them. What you got for the Florida State Seminoles taking on Boston College on Saturday?
I got a spiked baseball is what I've got. It's been a minute since Florida State has spiked a baseball. I remember going to a game, it was on a Friday night up at Chestnut Hill years ago. It was 14-0. Florida State scored in its first drive. I want to say it's 2015 because Everett Golson led them down the field, and then Jalen Ramsey had a scoop and score in the second half. Have they had one since then? I'm not sure, but they're going to get one on Saturday. I don't know how many they're going to score. It's going to be a soupy, weird. Ira, bring all the windbreakers you have, bring towels, bring everything. But I think Florida State wins. I'll pick a score. How about 28-0? 28-0 Noles.
Okay, 29. So you're definitely forecasting rain then. In that case, it sounds like if they're going to be held to 28 points. What do you think, Ira? What's your prediction?
Yeah, no, I think Tom sold me. I like the idea of a shutout. I don't know if I could go there though, because I think there's a chance Florida State could turn the ball over or something crazy could happen in the bad weather. So I'm going to say 35-7. I think Florida State, it's convincing, workmanlike, just get in and get out. I think you're going to see a lot of running of the football, especially if the conditions aren't very good. I think we all reserve the right, though, if somehow it's a clear day, that we get to expand our margins. But based on the idea that it's going to be a little bit nasty, I would say 35-7.
We're predicting everything. We're predicting the score and the weather with this one. I think Florida State's just going to be average. You know, they're just going to have an average day, which is 55.5 points. I'll tick down. I'll hedge myself on the weather. I'll say 49-3. I think even with gusty, gross conditions, man, this defense will create enough short fields and turnovers, and Florida State's effective enough and will be able to throw the ball somewhat to continue to score points seemingly at will. So that average might come down just a touch, but I also think it's probably going to miss. I'm hoping. I speak into existence.
Can I change my pick?
Well, sure.
Well, 42-7. 42-7. Let's go.
Oh, man.
Do I hear 45? 45?
Yeah, right.
42-7.
Oh, we're auctioneers. What are you more excited to see, guys? The Rocky Mountain Showdown with Deion and Colorado State, or Tennessee beating Florida, hopefully in the swamp as we go out?
That's a good question, man. I think, you know what? After watching the last couple Colorado games, I think I'm going to give myself a break from Colorado football this week. I might tune back in when they play Oregon and Southern Cal, but as of right now, I think I may sit that one out. So probably Tennessee, Florida, and we'll see though, man. Florida, for whatever reason, has had Tennessee's number a lot, especially in the swamp. But I think this Florida team might be a little bit different, so Tennessee might get the big win.
Yeah, who doesn't want to see the third pick in the NFL draft next year in Shadur Sanders, which is, I think that's what Mel Kiper called him, several people, number 3 quarterback, way better than Jordan Travis as a quarterback, clearly, if we're talking about him that high. So, anytime I can see that, no, never mind. I want Tennessee and Florida, no doubt, 7 o'clock, as long as the game kicks off when it should, everybody should have their different responsibilities at Warchant wrapped up at that time. Maybe Aslan, if you're around town, you want to go get a cocktail and watch the first half of that game. That's always a fun watch because when the Noles can get together, especially when times are good, and then they can just root against an opponent, that's got its own juice, and I look forward to that.
Yeah, ain't got to twist my arm on that one. Stay connected to warchant.com throughout the week as we get ready for kickoff. Don't forget the Jeff Cameron Show, 1 to 3 o'clock. Wake Up Warchant in the mix as well. Will there be a pregame show since it's an away game, Tom?
11 a.m., just a 1 hour lead up to kickoff pregame show. Yes.
All right, check that out, folks. Warchant TV, subscribe, hit the thumbs up. We certainly would appreciate it. For Ira and Tom, I'm Aslan. Thanks so much for watching this edition of the Warchant Report, powered by Cummins.